Thanks for tuning into the For Those Made to Do podcast. We are your hosts, Mandy Sahota
and Bianca Pavel. This podcast is all about the doers who have achieved career success in the UAE and the stories that go with it.
In this episode, we're speaking to Ghaith Rahman from Dubai's Future Foundation for all those made to do innovation and future thinking in the UAE. We're exploring how government and business collaborate here and where regulators and innovators, large and small, meet to create the future.
We're learning that the UAE government is the biggest spender in the market, and Ghaith shares insights on the type of startups they typically incubate and invest in. We also talk about what makes a good founder, the character traits that thrive in this market, and who gets to sit at the creator table. Finally, we touch on Dubai's efforts to become a place where global talent really wants to be, ultimately making you all question, should you move to Dubai? Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today's episode is for those made to do innovation and future thinking, two immensely rewarding areas of work. And we're extremely excited to have Ghaith Abdul Rahman with us. Ghaith is a senior project lead at the Dubai Future Foundation, a mentor at Techstars, a professor at Holt, and has a successful record in strategy consulting. Ghaith, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Pleasure to be here. Good way to end the Monday.
Awesome.
Right, let's get straight into it. We've got lots of interesting questions for you today.
Sure.
So can we start off by you telling us a little bit more about you and your experience and how you got started with the Future Foundation?
Definitely. I think the best way to describe my career has been just to, it's such a millennial experience. I signed up to be an archaeology student in the States, and then I ended up staying here for personal reasons, and I ended up studying finance here for 4 years, and just when I was about to get excited about the topic, I graduated and the financial crisis hit the UAE. So I ended up without a job for a while, but then I got hired by a partner in PwC who wanted to start a strategy practice. And he said, I need young, hungry people. And I said, absolutely, let's do it. So I joined them, did it for a few years, and then I got hired by the Executive Office of His Highness through the same partner again. And I joined them to basically run a series of projects. One of them was an open innovation project called Open Ecosystem, called Area 2071, which has basically government, multinationals, and startups solving for industry challenges. And then the project transitioned to Dubai Future Foundation because it made more sense. And I transitioned with the project to DFF, and I've been with DFF since then.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Dubai Future Foundation for those people who are not quite kind of versed with what it is?
Yeah, so look, I think it's important to put context into it as well. I think a lot of people, when they think about the future, they seem to think that the future is only 20, 30 years from now, right? But I think the foundation does a really good job at focusing on a very strategic horizon of 3 to 5 years, which is still a bit in the future, but it's not too far out there for people not to care or not to do something about things now. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we started off as really an idea, and we were an exhibition within the World Government Summit, which is this massive event that brings together government officials from all over the world to talk about the future of government. It started off also as a UAE event, and it became a global event. So we were pitched as a way to drive future thinking within government, but institutionalizing it. So His Highness loved the idea. He said, this is great, let's build a whole organization around it. So it started off to do 3 things, which was, 1, prepare the next in line government leaders to run their government entities. As you know, the way that government is structured here, it's different. They're not just a service provider, but they're also the regulators. So there's double pressure on them to constantly innovate. But that means that they need to understand where the sector is going, for example, transport, health, energy, but also understand challenges within the sector and what can cause disruption from new business models, new technologies. And then there's the other element of training, right? So the training and the future foresight there is really there to equip leaders and government for that. And then the third function is, and that's where I sit, it's where we take a lot of that thinking and actually applying it on the ground, right? So these are the main areas for DFF.
And I think you touched on a few really interesting points there around the relationship between the the government and the private sector.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's just moved here a few months ago, I was kind of surprised by how close this relationship is and how much the government is driving the agenda in terms of innovation. So for anyone like me listening in today, can you tell us a bit more about the relationship between the government and the private sector here?
Yeah, definitely. Look, the context of that is the government is the biggest player in the market in the sense that they are one of the biggest spenders, but they drive a lot of that spending. Private sector definitely spends. There's also the presence of the family houses and businesses here. They're actually huge components of the economy. And you also have the likes of Emirates, DP World, which were early government bets, 10, 30 years ago, that turn out to be super successful, right? So you have all these components. A lot of this is either driven by government or sponsored by government, right, at some point. And that's the relationship between them. So they've become private entities, but they're so associated with the government agenda that they act almost on behalf of government sometimes in the economy. But when it comes to private entities or multinationals, the attitude for Dubai government is to always work closely with them because government can come in with regulations, with facilitation and creating an ecosystem for business to thrive, but they need those businesses to actually do the work and
implement,
right? But Dubai government implements a lot as well, but they also need partners in implementation. So the relationship is quite unique, which is something you don't see in Europe or the States.
Absolutely. And I think the government, and especially the Dubai Future Foundation, are really involved in creating a vision for the future, right? So we like to think a lot about the future, and this is what this podcast really is. We're looking at the future of work, we're looking at the future of different industries. So with Dubai in particular, what is the vision for growth for, let's say, 2030?
It's a tricky question. It depends who you ask. If you ask the RTA, it's a different answer from the municipality, from health authority. Like each of them has a very different approach towards what Dubai needs to be or where it needs to be in the next 30 years or by 2030, sorry. So, but Dubai pretty much has common denominators across all these visions, which is they want to be a global business hub. They want to be a place where entrepreneurs either start their business or scale their business to. They want a place that has the best amenities and facilities for people to live, start families. And I've lived here for more than 30 years. Like I've seen expat friends who come and say, I'm here for 2 years, and then they end up staying for 5-6 years. They have a mortgage, a family, and now they're having, grandchildren. So it's changed. The perception of the place has changed a lot. But that's really, these are the common denominators. They want people to come and stay. And that's what they've done. A lot of things around golden visas. And, they want people to stay because they recognize that they might be losing out on people with a lot of talent. And,
exactly. And they are actually putting some things in place to achieve that now.
Correct,
as well, What would you say are the key industries driving innovation in the UAE at the moment from what you're seeing currently in Europe?
Look, there's Dubai's been known for being a tourism hub, trade and retail, aviation, logistics and trade. Like these are kind of the core sectors that always drive Dubai, right? And recently they've really managed to patent the way they create a good lifestyle in Dubai. So everything from the safety to the diversity to the tolerance, like that creates a very unique brand of lifestyle that exists in other places, but in different degrees, right? So you always have these core sectors that almost never change because they're the backbone of Dubai and they're the ones that actually drove the growth beyond the financial crisis if you look at the numbers. But these are the core sectors, I would say. But if you look at the way that government is structured as well, like I said, they don't just set policies and regulations. They drive a lot of the initiatives. They drive a lot of the innovation. So, government has its faults, but in other words, they do drive a lot of positive initiatives and progress.
So you're currently involved in the Dubai Generative AI Assembly happening in October.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So look, we wanted to expand on our work and bring it more to a global audience, right? So there's several reasons why we launched the Dubai Assembly. So to give you context, it's a rotating concept every year. So last year, for example, the focus was on metaverse and Web3. This year, it's about generative AI. So we focus on a technology that is not just in the news, but actually where the big tech companies are spending a lot of their money, effort, They're building strategies around it. We see live use cases where it's impacting the economy. So we carefully choose the theme. Last year, we chose metaverse because there's a lot of talk about the metaverse. But we also went and did our research and said we needed to go in with a point of view. So we created the assembly to unify the conversation around emerging tech, which is super fragmented at the moment. You have regulators and policymakers sitting on one side, and then the opposite side, you have startup companies that are driving new models and new tech in a way where the governments are not catching up to. And then you have big tech, who's also doing the same, but they have more pull with government. And then you have academia, you have the public. So nobody is really talking. They speak in pockets, but they're not on the same stage. So that was one drive behind creating the assembly. And the other drive was to really bring that theme for that year closer to decision makers in government and private sector and helping them understand it. Because most people, when they talk about GenAI, they think what? Bard, ChatGPT. But there's so much more to it, right?
So we were in the last episode referring to it as the beast. So we can carry that metaphor ahead in this episode.
The all too mentioned beast. Everyone's talking about it all the time.
Yeah. So the assembly is localized for the UAE, bringing all these different factors together here locally.
Yeah. So we bring global speakers.
Yeah.
So the way we do it is we break down the tech. So we have sessions that talk about, generative AI 101. What is it? Why is it a big deal now? AI has been around for years. What's so distinctive about this? Why are companies investing so much money into it? Where's the impact? And then we go and we try to, let's say, humanize the tech, right? By talking about use cases. Where is this being implemented? Can we see some impact? What could be the projection and the impact globally? What sectors are being let's say disrupted or changed or about to be disrupted? Why is that the case? And then, you don't want to overhype the tech as well. So you have a balanced view, which comes from regulators who come and say, technology is great, but it's causing 1, 2, 3 in terms of challenges and problems, right? So the event is balanced in its approach. So last year we walked in with a hypothesis internally that says, it's too early for metaverse yet. No one has really created a full-on immersive, virtual world that has all the elements that you would need to abandon real life for a period of time during your day, and that's true. It was, we were correct.
It was just hype.
A lot of it was hype, but there was a lot of truth to it as well. So people were building immersive experiences that were doing some amazing work in, for example, psychology, in training, in education. But nobody knew about them. They were just covered by the hype. So what we wanted to do was bring those to the light and say, to create a full metaverse that is unbiased, inclusive, will positively take people away from a real experience into a virtual experience, it will take some time, right? Yeah. But it was important to say that versus GenAI that's happening right now, right? So there's no escape from it. So it's a very fun event. It's if anybody knows South by Southwest in the States, it's South by Southwest meets government event. So it's quite a fun. Maybe you guys should come and check it out.
We
later.
would love to. That's an invite. We'll be there.
Definitely. We're happy to invite you guys. Yeah.
So what's the hypothesis this year for AI? Do you have one already?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's like GenAI is happening. There's no escaping it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a balanced view, and it depends who you talk to. If you talk to regulators, they'll tell you, we need to calm down, we need to slow down, which is partially true. But if you buy into the conversation that's happening globally with policymakers and regulators, you'd think that it's a super demonized technology. But when you go to the use case owners and the big tech companies, they give you a very rosy view. So you have to really look through both statements or both views. And the view is that this technology is helpful. It's not any different than any other technology that came with a massive breakthrough. You just need to take it a bit slowly and try to see where it can impact people's lives positively and focus on that. And if there was ever a doubt before that government needs to work with big tech,
that's gone.
This is the time to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard what Elon Musk said, and some of the big
futurists, they're warning about
Correct.
AI.
Yeah, and they have a valid reason to say that, right? So if there's ever a time for the two biggest incumbents in the market to work together, it's time to do it right now.
It's good to see that the UAE is taking it in its stride, though, rather than trying to avoid the inevitable.
100%.
And then trying to deal with it after the fact rather than just getting ahead of it just makes so much more sense.
You can't really stop it, right?
No, you
it's
can't.
out there, so
It's
you
out
might
there.
as well get on board and just have a say in how it impacts society.
Yeah. And bring the right people to have a conversation, right? It doesn't make sense to have a fragmented conversation. It doesn't make sense not to have a conversation. So you need to bring the right people on board to talk about it, but then to action something out of it. And that's like, if like we all remember how Uber first came out, and they took London by storm, and the UK government shut them down for a bit, but Uber still survived.
Yeah.
Lyft, Uber in the States had a similar scenario as well. They were all shut down in the beginning, but then they found a way to work with government. But after they were shut down for a long period of time, what we did in Dubai was we sat with Uber and Careem, which weren't the same company back then, and we sat them with the regulators, and we said, this is happening, you need to wrap your head around it. But we looked at Uber and Careem and said, you can't keep doing what you're doing. You need to find a way to work with government instead of constantly being in the gray area. And they found a formula that works for both. And now they both work legally. Where in some countries in the region, they don't exist legally. So again, there's a very different approach to how you should get someone like a founder who comes from a very agile and fast go-getter attitude, and a government employee who's trying to have the social bottom line in mind.
Yeah.
Getting them to kind of agree takes a lot of time.
This is a bit of a basic example, but I want to give it because obviously I've grown up in the UK where the kind of personality traits of being a British person is that we like to complain a lot and we're quite cynical as people. And I remember the beginning of 2022 when the week changed from Thursday to Sunday. So Monday to Friday, and it just happened literally the beginning of the new year, and it just kind of happened, and it was just such an easy transition. I was amazed, mesmerized, and then I was I like living here because there was no fuss. It just kind of happened, and it was this is what we're doing. Everyone get on board, and it just kind of happened. It was a smooth transition. If that was literally anywhere else, about 50 million things would have broken. But here, I just feel there is a bit of an agility to things and decisions, and I think it's quite fascinating actually when you come from somewhere like a kind of old institutionalized country like the UK
or the US. I think sometimes the government is such a big machine that it's counterproductive to society, and this is not an attack on governments or anything, but when we're thinking back on the trials we've seen with Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg coming in and having to explain what a profile was and how privacy works and how his platform collects data. And all of these politicians were there just trying to wrap their heads around what Facebook was, after it had been there for years and years. Yeah. I think that's the classic example of a government that is way too slow to adapt to the market conditions and way too slow to respond to change. And I think we're seeing the exact flip of that
or the TikTok conversation, and that was super surprising. Some of the people on the government side were not only inexperienced in the technology itself, they made some very wild assumptions based on I don't know where they got their sources from, but that's the kind of headline news that you would catch in a clickbait article, right? And I couldn't believe that some of them were reciting it. So it just shows you that there's a huge disconnect between someone who's sitting writing policy and a law and someone who's driving a business model and trying to make a piece of technology work. And it's scary how you see those examples, in front of you. But you just have to be reminded of how bad the disconnect is. Yeah. And that's one of the main drivers of the assembly is that, we need to bring these two people together, these two groups together to understand it better.
Love that. All right, so continuing on that idea of startup innovation and new business models. So globally, the United Arab Emirates has one of the most supportive environments for entrepreneurship. Yeah. And it's actually ahead of other economies like the UK, the US, Japan, Canada, and others. And we know that you're working with your team to bring these new business models to fruition and also pilot them and see how they work in practice. So what would you say is the recipe to success when it comes to innovation?
Look, innovation is such a broad word. We try to be a bit more specific and not vague about what we mean by innovation. What we mean by innovation is that there's a new idea that you're trying to drive that could improve a bottom line on something. And for us, it's always the social good of Dubai. Or we have a metric called return on Dubai, which is, if we implement a project or start a project, what's the return on Dubai? And that return could really be economic, a mixture of economic, social, reputation, more people coming in, more entrepreneurs coming in, more MNCs. So the metric shifts, depending on what the objective is. So anything that could improve those metrics for us is innovation in some respect. But specifically within startups, what we've done post-pandemic, so we were one of the first economies that opened up and countries that opened up, right, to visitors, to businesses. And we wanted to make that obvious because there were countries that shut down their economies for such a long time that it made it impossible for small, medium enterprises or even that are not tech-based to survive. Mm-hmm. So what we did was, as soon as we opened up, we started a massive exercise of onboarding companies, onboarding individuals who have never been in Dubai before, but they're now in Dubai because of that exercise. And we extended everything from, the easy setup, the licensing, the incentives of golden visas, finding the right talent. And for some key figures within the startup ecosystem globally, we gave them a very tailored and concierge approach to bring them and their families here. So a lot of them have moved. When we did the event yesterday about Metaverse and Web3, we had a large amount of people in the Web3 space present in Dubai that we didn't even know moved to Dubai. And we met them at the event and we were genuinely shocked that they were there. And it was on the back of that exercise that we've done. So a lot of it is trying to make it as easy for them to set up as possible, but also have the right incentive. And the way we look at it is we need to differentiate ourselves from the regional markets and economies that are either bigger in size or have a lot more funding in certain places. We try to distinguish ourselves from that because the size of the market in the UAE is quite small, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just going to interrupt. So how does this differ to Abu Dhabi? Because a lot of what you've said is Dubai-centric.
Yeah.
So is there a synergy between the two Emirates?
Definitely. It has to be. Yeah. Look, when you're looking at Dubai, a lot of it spills over to Abu Dhabi and vice versa. And there's common benefits for both. Abu Dhabi built a fantastic startup, ecosystem that's, focused within certain sectors. They have a very good investment model. Dubai does the same. So there's almost like a synergy play between them. But even within Dubai, like the work that we do in the accelerators, we don't have for example, we don't focus on fintech because we know that Fintech Hive and the IFC focuses on fintech. Mm-hmm. We don't focus, for example, too much on media because we know that In5 focuses a little bit on media. So we don't exist to cannibalize other programs or other people's piece of the pie. We do something very unique and niche, and we stick to it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that you're focusing on attracting solutions from the world, so beyond the borders of the UAE, to come here and essentially utilize that knowledge and that innovation and impact the society here. Can you give us an example of a startup that's thrived that way?
Definitely, yeah.
And after that, can you also give us an example of a homegrown startup that you guys have nurtured from the very beginning? Because I think there are a lot of really, really exciting businesses that started here and have gone global instead. Yeah,
definitely. Look, there's the classic example of how Careem was born here, right? Mm-hmm. Careem's journey was such a fun journey. Like they actually did a screening for their 10-year anniversary, which recaptured key moments in their journey and how there was a few key moments where government played a vital role in helping them become a strong unicorn within the region. Mm-hmm. And then, so when they got acquired by Uber, it was a huge success for us. And even Souk.com, which became part of Amazon, right? Yeah. Like that was a homegrown brand and company. And if it wasn't for the favorable business environment that we had here, these companies would not have thrived. I mean, as you know, there's a huge percentage of startups that fail, right? Very few of them make it, but that's for good reason. So that percentage is never going to go down to zero as much as you're going to have to drive it down as much as you can, right? So what we did was we tried to make it as easy as possible for these guys, not just to thrive, but to get acquired, because we knew it was going to be a very good story for Dubai and the region. And that pushed more and more acquisitions to happen, either horizontally or, There's a lot of acquisitions that are high in value, but they don't get the right light because of they're just not the Karim and they're not, souk. But that opened the floodgates to a lot of these deals to happen. More entrepreneurs come in from outside to open up in the region. And the mergers and acquisition market in the region thrived partially because of that as well, because they saw that big names are coming into the market. Another successful example was this startup in Germany that signed up for one of the RTA challenges, the Roads and Transport Authority challenges. And RTA wanted to find a solution that basically helped them predict what they called desert transportation areas in Dubai, which didn't have access to a lot of public transportation. And they wanted to find a very agile solution for it. So it might not be an economically feasible idea to put a bus there, right? Or, a bus for the route. So we took this company's solution, we pivoted it to become a bus on demand, whereby you can demand the bus service, and based on your location, your typical journey, it does the calculation of how long it will take to pick you up and drop you off with other passengers as well. And it does all that for the driver. So if you go to the RTA app, you can find that service now. This was one of the projects that we were super proud of because we were able to solve a very critical problem by taking somebody else's solution and pivoting it here. And the company basically opened up shop here, and now they're working with. But we did 6 months of trials on the ground before we launched it because we needed to get the data in and to allow it to kind of add value when it's launched.
Say you're a potential student thinking of coming to Dubai, and you live somewhere else in the world, and they have a business idea that they think could work here. How would that person get involved, say, with the Future Foundation? What would be the kind of process for that?
Yeah.
If it was something, a part of this metric, the return on Dubai.
Yeah. Look, what we're doing recently, and this is something that we can launch with soon and DFF, is we recognize that a lot of these ideas are early stage. There's plenty of programs in the city that you can apply to and they can help you, right, with early stage. But because we recognize that institutions like yourselves put a lot of time and effort into vetting, the students themselves, right? And they always come from either good academic background or that plus a lot of experience. So you've already done the vetting for us. So you've already gotten us potentially the golden visa, the next golden visa holder, or the next person who can contribute to an idea or launch an idea. So our drive is to work with academia more to bring on, more of these students. So we actually launched a program called the University Entrepreneurship Program that focuses on the same thing, but for bachelor level. And it runs the same way. They pitch ideas, we filter them, we help them build the good ideas, and then these guys get initial funding they need to launch. And then based on that, they go through the process. But there's now a need to do that with the likes of HULT and other business schools in the city and the country to double on that impact, because your audience is slightly different than the bachelor's degrees, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So hopefully we'll hear some good news soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually,
We'll push it out as well, push the agenda out.
send us the link. We'll get it out. So actually, on that note of university students and young talent and future talent, this is a podcast about professional development and future careers. So I wanted to talk a bit about the profile of these innovators. So while I was looking at the Dubai Future Foundation, right on the landing page of the website, there's a quote that says, "The future is not ours to await, it is ours to create," which I loved. So just wanted to ask you, what is the profile of that creator if you're thinking about their mindset and their skills and their knowledge, and how can business schools help create tomorrow's creator?
Yeah. So I've worked with founders for the past 6 years, and there's a common denominator trait across all of them: hunger. They are curious, and that's what drives the hunger. I mean, put these two together in any personality, and they'll get knowledge, they'll learn on their own, they'll get themselves signed up for where they need to get signed up. But without these two characteristics, you'll just get someone who does a date, they'll do normal things. But founders, people who actually drive the success of these, it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. I'm sure you guys know this. It's super difficult. Right? It's such an uphill journey that it takes another level of tenaciousness just to be a successful founder, right? And it's that combination of hunger and curiosity that makes founder a successful founder. A really good VC, venture capital, doesn't invest in companies. They invest in people. They invest in the founder and his team. And oftentimes or not, you see a serial entrepreneur who's really, truly a serial entrepreneur who's successful. He has created teams that are investable, right? Who can create products, who can create services.
Or she.
Or she, right? But they hire the people and they leave one company and start another company and create teams that are successful, right? That's what attracts the money. That's what attracts the fame. That's what attracts everybody. So it's that combination, that profile of people who personally I love working with. And you'll find them not just in founders, you find them in academia, you find them in private sector and government. You just need to give them the right atmosphere to thrive, right? But these are the characteristics that I definitely think will drive change anywhere.
How would you describe the behavior of a hungry person? Like, what do they do? Do they spend their hours practicing a certain, I don't know, skill, or do they read about the future? Do they speak to people in the industry? How do you quantify it?
Yeah,
because everybody will say, "I'm hungry, take me."
Yeah.
How do you dissociate between those people?
I'll give you an example that you guys can relate to. Like, we've been doing sessions at Halt with the capstone projects and how to turn very difficult concepts that are hard to imagine into something that is tangible, right? And I've seen teams driven by people, or teams themselves that are driven by super hungry people. And these are people who have, so when I'm there in the room, they ask me the right questions because they don't have all the answers. But they're very tenacious about the questions. They ask me endless questions that they then use the answers for to build whatever they need to build. But they go and they ask people in the industry, they find numbers, they find out what they're solving for. And I always ask the teams when I come into Health, and I tell them, you're not pitching an idea, you're pitching a solution for a problem. You're telling us about a problem that exists that you're fixing, right? Don't tell me about tech. I've heard a pitch that says, we're going to build the AI of AIs. No, that's not what we're looking after. We want you to take that and fix a real problem. Because the other thing is that they take, when you know what problem you're solving for, everything falls into place, right? If you have the right hunger and curiosity, because then you
ask the right questions.
You ask the right questions of how to solve it, not just what the problem is. Now you're going to solve it. So that hunger and tenacity goes into both the problem and the solution. And it sounds simple, but it really isn't. It's super complicated. So that's a definition for me.
That sounds great, yeah. And for those hungry people that come here to Dubai, and we are on the front line of receiving them and meeting them, they come from all over the world to Holt International Business School, right? And we get the chance to spend some time with them. And then we see them leaving the school and embarking on these amazing adventures and careers. On the other side, we're speaking to employers who are saying that they're not getting enough talent and they're not hiring the right talent. And we're sitting here in the school and we're thinking, well, we're seeing this talent out there. We know it's here, and we know that they are looking for those opportunities. How is Dubai creating that space where global talent wants to be and can thrive? Because there are some statistics, again, published by the Dubai Future Foundation, which say that not all companies manage to recruit the talent they need.
Yeah.
So how does that synergy happen?
Yeah. No, you're spot on. The talent is it's not just a pivotal topic, but it's such a big problem. Even when I told you earlier about that exercise we did to attract companies to come here, we actually found it less difficult to sell Dubai as a place to be and to live and to do business, and a lot harder to answer questions like, where can I find my next talent? When can I find my next CTO, my developer, the product manager? These are all positions within a startup company, for example, that is very difficult to find. And not just here, globally. It's a global issue, finding those specific people. And then it becomes even tougher when you look at, where's the female version of that? Because there's unfortunately not enough women in the tech field, right? Yeah. So you get asked these questions and you have to say it's tough. But we do know, for example, that Jordan, Egypt, the Levant are feeder markets. Like they have a lot of people in those spaces that just need to be identified. These are a lot of companies that have made it here in the region started off from those, we call them startup kitchens, because they start there because it's way cheaper to start. If you can survive that harsh environment of vetting your company, you can come here, you have a very good chance of starting here to expand and scale. But yeah, that statistic is absolutely right. And that applies for someone who's a founder who's trying to hire a CTO, or a CEO who's trying to hire someone on a CTO level in a corporate. talent is very hard to get. But what we, like I said earlier, we try to solve the common denominator, which is, we need to create the best environment for them to come and live and work and start families and be anchored here, because we want people's legacy to be what they leave behind, which is their family and their stories,
rather than kind of coming here thriving and then taking that away with them because they don't feel like they
Correct.
can place roots. And I think
Correct.
this shift is going to make such a difference.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
On this kind of subject of kind of international collaboration and these feeder markets, what role does international collaboration play in the UAE's innovation ecosystem? And are there any kind of notable partnerships with other countries? Because we read recently about the kind of 30 global unicorn startups that they want to kind of implement over the next 10 years. So is there any kind of specific places that you guys are looking at?
To be honest, it's Dubai is an emerging city and it's an emerging market, right? So obviously a lot of what happens, so a lot of the points, the positive points that we talked about, regulation being a bit more flexible and agile here versus the States and Europe. Europe, for example, it's very, very structured and it's very difficult to kind of change anything there. So part of the reason is that, there's a drive to kind of be positioned Dubai, not just globally, but especially amongst other emerging countries as well. So you have collaborations with Southeast Asian countries, African countries, Eastern European countries. These are all countries and economies that have similar targets and ambitions as the UAE and Dubai, which is, we want to grow, we want to make this place great. And each of them has a very good quality and specialty that can leverage off. And we look for those synergies based on that. So if Jordan, for example, has an excellent feeder market of talent, we go there, we establish relationships, we say, we have a good environment and conducive of talent. Do you want to push some of your talent here? We'll help them develop, we'll help them start companies, and they can always feed back. There are people who don't want to move, create a partnership where they can stay, they can get paid, according to salaries here. But there's so many things that we do that try to bridge the gap between countries. But also there's a flow of companies and talent between countries as well that's never stopped since even after COVID.
Could I ask, is there any particular African country that is kind of in the collaboration funnel?
Yeah, look, there's, South Africa's one for sure. Yeah. Nigeria is one. There's a really good tech hub there, tech space. Cairo, Egypt, super impressive. Tunisia, Morocco. These are all countries that have a very, very well established startup ecosystem, that we always work with. Yeah.
Right. So we're drawing to the end of our conversation. It's been incredibly fascinating. I've been taking notes throughout, so I'll be using these in my advising sessions. We normally close our conversations with a wildcard question, a question that challenges both our guests and our listeners as well. Its purpose is to kind of challenge you into big thinking if there were no limits or constraints, etc. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you, in the Global 50 report, where the government has launched predictions on the next years, there are many predictions such as biohacking 2.0, electromagnetic fields, quantum avatars,
some of these are scary.
farms. I'm reading them and I'm like, what is this? And my personal favourite, Earth exploration.
I had a lot of fun with that.
And telepossible. Okay. There's a list of 40 topics, one each more exuberant than the other. So if you had the most capable team in the world and a limitless budget, which one of these problems would you start working on tomorrow and what would you do? Okay. So before you answer, we're going to leave it there as food for thought. If you're keen to hear Ghaith's answer, tune into our bonus episode next week. You can also head to the Future Foundation's website if you'd like to read more on the Global 50 report and, if you're interested in learning more. So thank you, guys.
Pleasure.
We're going to end the conversation here and we will resume it next week in the bonus episode. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Great conversation.